Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas. And today is St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2025 at 1:03 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I'm going to start with Seth Keshel, but before I do, I wanted to remind everybody that the 30% off special continues at epicminerals.net. For those of you looking to take care of heavy metal toxicity, the Zeolite Extra Spray is for you, as is the Colloidal Silver Extra Spray and the amazing Wellness Extra Capsules, all containing humic and fulvic acids and various things that make you better. I swear by the Zeolite Extra and the Silver Extra. Get them at 30% off. Promo code FREEDOM30 to take advantage of this amazing special. Take care of it while it lasts. epicminerals.net, promo code FREEDOM30. And now, from skeshel.substack.com, how much of Biden's term will be invalidated by the AutoPen scandal? Inside the legality, precedent, and most importantly, intent of the revelation that almost nothing of importance was signed by Joe Biden for 4 years. Late last night, President Donald Trump went hot over the Biden AutoPen issue that has popped up this month. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social. The pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by AutoPen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people who did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the unselect committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, Joe Biden. March 16th, 2025 at 9:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The subject piques my interest for more than one reason. I have a large collection of historical signed items, including from many all-time baseball greats and American icons like Ronald Reagan, Eddie Rickenbacker, and President Trump himself. A key checkpoint in the authentication process is to ensure items aren't signed by a ghost signer, someone else signing the signature, or AutoPen. Modern AutoPens, mechanical devices replicating a signature, have been around since the 1930s, and their established use by some presidents clouds this issue more than you would think, and more than President Trump's social media post lets on. Other presidents have indeed used AutoPens, but typically for documents of minimal importance. To underscore my point, it wasn't until 2011 that the legality of presidential AutoPens came under fire, because it was then that Barack Obama became the first president to have his signature affixed on a piece of legislation by one. Obama was in France, and an AutoPen was used to sign legislation extending the dreadful USA Patriot Act. Legality. So, what happened after Obama's AutoPen conundrum? The Government Accountability Office, GAO, in response to the uproar, reviewed the validity claims and determined that the signature was valid under the Constitution's requirement for the president to, quote, take care that laws be faithfully executed. This provides major space for interpretation, presumably giving the president the ability to delegate tasks like affixing signatures on documents to someone else. The GAO, in Obama's case, determined that signatures of this sort are valid so long as approved by the president whose signature is being affixed. That ruling corroborated a 2005 memo from the Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, called Use of Autopen in Connection with Signing of Legislation, which emphasized that a president's intent is what counts, not the manner or means of affixing the signature. Examples from Harry S. Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower were furnished as examples to support the context of the memo. George W. Bush, president at the time of the memo, did not use autopen to sign legislation. So, what is the big deal? I doubt President Trump is basing his argument on the mechanical use of the autopen. After all, it has been generally accepted and corroborated in 2005 and 2011 that autopen usage is legal, provided the signature is approved by the president whose name is affixed. Verification for important documents such as landmark legislation or controversial pardons is simple and could be obtained in a simple press release or question and answer session with the media. Trump is clearly making the argument that Biden's actions via autopen are null and void, or, as he put it, void, vacant, and of no further force or effect, in that he had no intent and no knowledge of what was being done under his nose, because his handlers, who are now coming out of the woodwork to share juicy stories, have thrown him under the bus to journalists like Jake Tapper, who have monetized the cognitive decline the rest of America could see plainly for 4 years of a presidency and a bonus year of a candidacy. The culprit letter, of course, was Biden's July 21st, 2024 correspondence on personal letterhead bearing his real signature signed by his own hand, shown below. The Heritage Foundation went into great detail explaining the vast sea of documents that can be identified as autopen signed, though the media are in overdrive, alleging that many of the documents designated as such were indeed signed by hand. 3 key takeaways. 1. If Biden wasn't giving his consent to these autopen signed documents, then who the hell was? A key testimony is Speaker Mike Johnson's, who alleges Biden couldn't recall signing a recent executive order bearing his signature. It has been widely alleged and believed that Biden's presidency was simply a third Obama term, with shadowy figures calling the shots to unravel Trump's 2017 to 2021 reforms and weaken America further. Trump's call for a thorough investigation of this, if it gets the standard committee treatment, may only produce sternly worded letters, but it will raise major awareness to the extent foreign and domestic special interests have been controlling American politics for years, even foreign governments you've been told are friendly to U.S. interests. 2. The use of autopen isn't forbidden by presidents, though it is not customary for important documents such as legislation, pardons, or other newsworthy items in which the president is pictured at the resolute desk with satisfied onlookers. The media likes to point at Trump for having autopen signed items in his first term, but we all know Trump makes a show of important signings, so much so that the sound of his pen has been featured in ASMR relaxation mock-up recordings. What is forbidden, however, is the use of an autopen when the president doesn't give his consent for the affixing of his signature. Do you remember when Joe Biden was seated for Trump's January 20th, 2025 inauguration, when it was announced that he had pardoned his entire crime family at the last minute and dished out other preemptive pardons? Who had access to the autopen then? 3. Hypothetically, if a committee could pursue testimony like Johnson's and get much more from those who fed Tapper for his book and are dishing out tell-alls in the post-Biden days, much of Biden's time in office, much like his ridiculous 81 million votes, could be displayed as an historical farce. Could anything be invalidated or withdrawn? It could be unprecedented. But then again, there's a first time for everything. How about this list of pardons? Hunter Biden, December 1st, 2024. James Biden, January 20th, 2025. Valerie Biden Owens, January 20th, 2025. Anthony Fauci, Mark Milley, Liz Cheney, Leonard Peltier, Adam Schiff, all January 20th, 2025. Conclusion. As usual, the media are up the creek without a paddle, giggling at Trump over other presidents who have used an auto pen while refusing to consider the heart of the matter, which is intent. Biden, as evidenced by his withdrawal letter and the testimony of Mike Johnson, almost certainly did not oversee every affixing of his signature nor approve every action that bears it, confirming what countless tens of millions of Americans have suspected since 2021. Trump is right to raise this issue and call for investigations, but the investigations only matter if they go somewhere. Investigation fatigue is a real thing, especially given how many angry statement and sternly worded letters the people have been given over the years instead of serious consequences being dished out to evildoers. Still, if there were ever a time for something to be invalidated, then I see no reason why those pardons, at minimum, would stand up if it can be proven Biden wasn't behind the intent of the executed documents. Anthony Fauci is praying that these investigations don't go anywhere. And that is the latest from the brilliant Seth Keshel. Guys, go to skeshel.substack.com. That's skeshel.substack.com. Seth is putting out stuff like crazy, and it's all fire. So check it out today at skeshel.substack.com. Let them know Reading Epic Threads sent you. And now, my friends, just a reminder that you can go right now to tulipblooms.shop or epicminerals.net. Both places, one for the greatest skincare the world has ever known, and two for the greatest zeolite and colloidal silver the world has ever known, along with humic and fulvic acids in all of the Epic Minerals products. Just use promo code FREEDOM30. Now, it's a one-time use kind of thing, guys, so make it count. Freedom30, one use per customer, 30% off both of those websites, epicminerals.net and tulipblooms.shop. Next, the great and brilliant Dawn Billy. Quite frankly, I just love doing her stuff. All right, let's begin. From dawnbilly.substack.com, the 9/11 conspiracy. The World Trade Center came down during your brother's reign. Remember that. Donald Trump to Jeb Bush. Presidential debate, February 13th, 2016. Just about everyone knows where they were and what they were doing on the day our country was forever changed. I was at home with an infant and a toddler on September 11th, 2001. Back then, emergency broadcasts didn't interrupt every channel, so when my husband called to ask if everything was okay at home, I explained that we had just figured out Blue's Clues. When he said we are on lockdown, I thought he was referring to his place of business. He finally told me to turn on the news, and everything changed. I placed my infant in the crib and my toddler in her bedroom and sat, dumbfounded, staring at the television. I had never felt so alone and scared in my life. Things were different from that moment on. Waking up the next day, we found that someone had come through our neighborhood and placed small flags in every yard. For weeks after, the sky was clear of airplanes except for the one helicopter that flew up and down the river near our home. I remember wondering what kind of world my children would grow up in. I imagine many young mothers wondered the same thing during COVID. By the time President Bush addressed the nation on September 20th, we had overcome most of the shock. We were pissed. We came together in our grief and anger. We were moved by stories of New Yorkers helping each other. Signs were posted all over the city of families in search of their missing loved ones. After air traffic was stopped, Canadians opened their doors to people stranded in airports. Rudy Giuliani became America's mayor. Young men and women around the country were showing up at the recruiter's office, signing over their lives to fight back against the terrorists who attacked us. We weren't going to allow this act to go unpunished. Some topics are more touchy than others. This is one of them. My family was lucky. We weren't directly affected by what happened on that day. We didn't lose anyone in any of the planes or at any of the attack sites. We didn't know any of the members of the police or fire who lost their lives on that day. No one in my family registered for the armed forces, putting their physical and mental health at jeopardy to fight for our country. The horror we felt that day must have been amplified greatly to those who were directly affected by it. That thought will remain at the forefront of my mind while I wade through this paper. Nothing that I write is meant as any disrespect or offense to anyone or any group of people. I'm just trying to make sense of a thought that I had. The U.S. government and 9/11. The assassination of President Kennedy took place over 60 years ago. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested and murdered soon afterward. I wonder how long it took for the American people to question the legitimacy of the story of a single shooter in the book depository. Did they question it that day, or did it take 10 or 20 years? According to a 2023 Gallup poll, 38% of Americans believe the United States government was the most likely co-conspirator in the assassination. I'm surprised it's not higher. President Trump must believe it's time for the American people to know the truth, since he signed an executive order declassifying the records surrounding the assassination. It's painful to go here, but since it's the thesis of this paper, I'm going to dive right in. Like the Kennedy assassination, I wonder how many Americans believe our government played a role in the 9/11 attacks. I don't mean played a role as in our government has destabilized so many nations that terrorists think we're infidels. I mean played a role as in helped to orchestrate the attacks in one way or another. This isn't a new idea. There have been many polls conducted regarding the belief that the government had some involvement in the 9/11 attacks. Regardless of the result of any poll, I think there would be 100% agreement that it would be horrific and unforgivable if our government played any role in those attacks. This paper isn't an attempt to convince myself or anyone else that the 9/11 attacks were an inside job. As a matter of fact, I pray it isn't true. But for the direction of where this paper is heading, I have to go with the assumption that it's at least possible that our government played some type of role in the attacks. I'm not naive to evil, but that level of evil will be hard to accept. There are many theories about the attacks. Were there really planes, or are we suffering from the Mandela effect? For the purpose of this paper, I'm going to stick with the official story that airplanes were hijacked and flown into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and an empty field in Pennsylvania. Many believe the papers came down due to explosions. In a television interview that day, Donald Trump said there were explosions coming from the buildings.
There's a great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it wasn't architectural defect. The World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall.
What would make our government want to commit such an evil act against the American people? I've heard people say that it was their way of stripping us of liberties with the Patriot Act. Was it used to destabilize the Middle East or weaken America, to give them an excuse to keep us in a war for decades? Was it a combination of all of these? If it was, it worked. On January 23rd of this year, Lara Logan posted the following to X. Margot Martin says, President Donald Trump signs an executive order to declassify the JFK, RFK, and MLK Jr. files. Lara Logan responds, historic, now do 9/11. Ghost of Base Patrick Henry replied with the following, are people really ready to learn the real culprit behind 9/11? It will be the end of the Republican Party. At the time I agreed with that post. I've since changed my mind. Would a 9/11 disclosure be the end of the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, or the Uniparty? Even though I voted for George Bush, I'm no longer a fan and see things much differently. I've read Joe Lang's series on the Bush family. I wish I could take my votes back. Yes, George Bush was president on that day, but he had only been in office for 9 months. Could the attacks have been planned and executed in that amount of time? Doubtful. The hijackers attended flight school in the United States during the summer of 2000 when Bill Clinton was president. Bill Clinton was also president during the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia, the USS Cole bombing in 2000, and many others. As a matter of fact, the Clinton Library claims that the 1990s were the period during which terrorism escalated. Is anyone surprised? The 9/11 attacks took place less than a year after Bill Clinton left office. Thinking that the 9/11 attacks may have been committed by our own government is such a massive conspiracy, and I'm just a person with an active imagination. Like many people, I have a lot of questions that will never be answered. I wonder who would have been involved in planning the attacks. Were the Clintons or Bushes involved? Was the CIA? Were other countries? What if there were experienced investigators who uncovered proof of what happened that day? If regular American citizens suspect the government was involved, couldn't members of law enforcement with access to information think the same thing? If they found evidence, what could they do with it? I can't imagine the danger they'd face. What if an honest investigator found evidence that members of the United States government attacked their own country? The 9/11 Commission. There are probably warehouses full of evidence and testimony. After the dust cleared, I'm sure some people saw things differently than they did on that day. After 25 years, we now have the benefit of hindsight, and things don't add up. The 9/11 Commission investigation took place between 2003 and 2004. Listening to the 9/11 Commission report stirred up some of the same anxiety I felt on that day. Other than that, I didn't learn much from the report. Obviously, there were gaps in procedures, and in some cases, one agency wasn't aware of what the other agency was doing. Communication was not properly shared, and warning signs were ignored. Richard Clarke was the chief counterterrorism advisor on the National Security Council, appointed by Bill Clinton. His testimony in front of the 9/11 Commission left me feeling that, at least in some part, 9/11 was a war between the CIA and the FBI. Mr. Clarke didn't appear to have much respect for the FBI and was quick to point out their mistakes. On several occasions, he points directly to the FBI's shortcomings in failing to stop the attacks. I don't recall him criticizing the CIA. In my opinion, he believed the FBI failed to heed the warnings issued by the CIA. His disapproval is noticeable in his testimony. In addition to the FBI's failures, he also speaks of President Bush's failure to take terrorism threats seriously. Mr. Clarke published a book, and inconsistencies between his prior testimony and what was written in his book and published in media accounts was brought up during his testimony. His book was described as a rounding, devastating attack on President Bush. He seemed to place a lot of the blame for the attacks on failures by President Bush and the FBI. As I listened to Mr. Clarke's testimony, I wondered how members of the FBI felt about it. 2001. After the 9/11 attacks, President Bush established the President's Surveillance Program, which allowed the National Security Agency, NSA, to surveil people within the United States without obtaining a warrant. The program was overseen by Vice President Dick Cheney and was codenamed Stellar Wind. It was originally designed to collect telephone and email data if one end of the communication was foreign or if there was a link to terrorism, even if they were within the United States. It has been referred to as warrantless surveillance or wiretapping. President Trump brought our attention to wiretapping when he tweeted that he was being wiretapped March 4th, 2017. Donald Trump on Twitter. Is it legal for a sitting president to be wiretapping a race for president prior to an election? Turned down by court earlier, a new low. March 4th, 2017. Donald Trump on Twitter. I bet a good lawyer could make a great case out of the fact that President Obama was tapping my phones in October, just prior to election. The media fell into the trap set by President Trump when they started to ridicule him for using the term wiretapping. They weren't successful in ridiculing him, but they were successful in spreading the message that our government uses warrantless surveillance wiretapping on American citizens. John Ashcroft was sworn in as Attorney General in February 2001. President Bush described him as a man of great integrity, a man of great judgment, and a man who knows the law. In 2004, the Justice Department discovered that the Stellar Wind program was collecting domestic communications from within the United States. The program was set to be renewed on March 11th, 2004. However, John Ashcroft and other DOJ lawyers concluded that the domestic surveillance program was illegal. Around this time, John Ashcroft was admitted to the intensive care unit at a local hospital, suffering from a serious illness. Unable to conduct his duties, his deputy attorney general became acting attorney general. As acting attorney general, James Comey informed the White House that authorization for the surveillance program would not be renewed. It was under Comey's supervision that the Justice Department began reevaluating Stellar Wind. On his way home one evening, James Comey received a call from his chief of staff informing him that Mrs. Ashcroft had contacted him, expressing concern that members of the president's staff were on their way to the hospital to see John Ashcroft. With lights and sirens activated, Comey headed toward the hospital, calling FBI Director Robert Mueller on the way. The Secret Service were ordered to guard Mr. Ashcroft's door. Comey raced to the hospital and ran up the stairs to Ashcroft's room. Quote, "I was concerned that, given how ill I knew the Attorney General was, that there might be an effort to ask him to overrule me when he was in no condition to do that," Comey later testified. Although Comey was successful in stopping the president's staff from seeking approval from John Ashcroft, the next day, President Bush signed an executive order to continue the program without the Justice Department's authorization. Comey drafted his letter of resignation effective the next day, but held off until he could be joined in a mass resignation by John Ashcroft, Robert Mueller, Christopher Wray, and others. After President Bush met with James Comey and Robert Mueller, he agreed to make changes to the program, although those changes were not disclosed. When George Bush won re-election in 2004, John Ashcroft delivered his resignation letter. Christopher Wray resigned from the FBI the following May, and James Comey left the Department of Justice the following August. Kayfabe. The term kayfabe has become a common term to describe the illusion of a conflict between President Trump and members of his own inner circle. The first instance of kayfabe that I remember was between President Trump and his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. I've never believed that President Trump was surprised by Jeff Sessions' recusal in the Russia collusion investigation. I'm convinced that just about everything that has played out has been done with intention. Nothing was left to chance, including Sessions' recusal. Jeff Sessions is a patriot, and it is my belief that he completed his role under President Trump and was fired for the sake of optics. This allowed him to work on other issues while taking the focus off of himself. He seemed to fade into the background for many years. Stephen Miller had been Jeff Sessions' policy advisor since 2009 and is now President Trump's current deputy chief of staff. Jeff Sessions was the first sitting senator to endorse President Trump in 2005 and was very involved in President Trump's campaign and his first administration. Their public feud over the Russia collusion investigation, while believable at the time, now seems like the perfect illustration of kayfabe. It was only the beginning. The FBI. Some of the most memorable FBI blunders of our lifetime happened under FBI Director Louis Freeh, who was fired by President Bush on June 1st, 2001. On September 4th, 1 week before the September 11th attacks, President Bush appointed Robert Mueller to serve as FBI Director, and he was unanimously confirmed in the Senate. During his career, Robert Mueller served under George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. Mueller was the only FBI director since Hoover to serve more than the 10-year limit. In 2011, Barack Obama asked Robert Mueller to remain as FBI director for a special 2-year extension. Congress unanimously granted the request. This special term ended in 2013, and James Comey was nominated and confirmed as FBI director. Comey served as FBI director from 2013 until President Trump fired him in 2017. After Comey's firing, President Trump met with Robert Mueller. It was reported that Robert Mueller was hoping to serve as FBI director again, but President Trump declined his offer. Robert Mueller was 73 years old and had retired as FBI director in 2013. Hindsight has made me more skeptical of this story than I was at the time. Reading through media stories from that time is almost embarrassing. The Washington Post reported that President Trump referred to Mueller as, quote, a true never-Trumper who had a conflict because of a business dispute. What was the business dispute? Mueller resigned his membership at the Trump Golf Club and requested a refund of his membership fee, and the club told him his name would be put on a list for a potential refund. We're supposed to believe that Donald Trump sat at his desk going through refund requests at his golf club? Was Robert Mueller mad that he didn't get the refund, or was Donald Trump mad that Mueller left his club? Are we supposed to believe that Mueller's withdrawal from the golf club caused a hardship for the Trump organization? Like I said, it's embarrassing. It was all kayfabe. The day after their meeting, Mueller was appointed as special counsel to investigate President Trump's role in the involvement of Russia in the Trump campaign. Robert Mueller was respected in Washington, D.C., and was seen as a bipartisan law enforcement official. His appointment was met with approval, and countless people on both sides cited Mueller as the best candidate to lead the investigation. A member of Mueller's law class said he was the perfect choice. Most important is his integrity. He is incapable of dishonesty or dissembling. His appointment has been universally applauded, as it should be. A journalist who has interviewed Mueller many times said, because of the deep respect and reputation Bob Mueller has in Washington, the good news for President Trump is if there is no there, Bob might be the only person in America who could come out, declare Donald Trump and his associates innocent, and be believed by both parties. Senator Chuck Schumer said, former Director Mueller is exactly the kind of individual for this job. I now have significantly greater confidence that the investigation will follow the facts wherever they lead. Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation lasted from May 2017 to March 2019 for 2 years. We were distracted by the pending doom that was expected to come from the Mueller investigation. The media was filled with stories of compromised investigators, Mueller's reported dementia, and President Trump's supposed threats to fire him. When the report was finally released, it was a dud. Newt Gingrich told Fox News, quote, the biggest conclusion I reached after watching Robert Mueller in front of Congress was that he clearly did not have a detailed knowledge of the report issued in his name, end quote. Just as with his report, Robert Mueller's testimony was a dud. He failed to answer nearly 200 questions, wasn't familiar with many details in the report, and after hours of testimony, didn't produce anything other than a waste of time. It was all a distraction. In his testimony, Robert Mueller wasn't dishonest, and he didn't dissemble. He also didn't provide any substance to the investigation. With the benefit of hindsight, we can look back on the entire Mueller investigation as a giant waste of time and energy. What was really happening during that time? FBI agents were uncovered for their corruption and lack of impartiality. President Trump was pretty much exonerated. But was there more? We were supposed to hate Mueller when he was appointed as special counsel. We were supposed to think he was compromised and partisan. Prior to 2017, there is nothing to substantiate that. On the contrary, Robert Mueller was a professional, by-the-book, law-abiding public servant. The doddering old fool story is bullshit. He did exactly what he was tasked to do while maintaining his integrity throughout. Prior to his time As special counsel and FBI director, Robert Mueller was employed at the Justice Department. During the 1990s, Robert Mueller served with William Barr under the George H.W. Bush administration, the same William Barr who served as President Trump's attorney general. Mueller and Barr have a high level of respect for each other and have maintained a friendship ever since. Their wives are close friends who attend Bible study together, and Mueller attended the weddings of two of Barr's daughters. The law enforcement men at the heart of just about every investigation involving President Trump were respected for their roles prior to 2017. None of the investigations amounted to anything of substance. They were all good friends with reputations for their integrity and commitment to the law. But we're supposed to hate them. The more they want us to believe a story, the more we should doubt that story. James Comey. Of all the people we were supposed to hate, James Comey has gotten the worst of it. He's the man everyone loves to hate, but it wasn't always that way. For most of his career, James Comey had the respect from members of both parties. He joined the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, where he worked from 1987 to 1993. While there, he earned a reputation as a tough litigator, prosecuting the Gambino crime family along with Rudy Giuliani. Although a great deal of animosity has been reported between Comey and Giuliani, it wasn't always that way. The two used to have a great admiration for each other. Giuliani was reported as saying that Comey was like a choir boy who turned into a devil. The Democrats hate Comey because they blame him for Hillary's loss in 2016. Republicans hate him because they've been led to believe he was a Clinton supporter working against President Trump. When Comey announced that there was evidence of potential violations regarding Hillary's handling of classified information, but he felt that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case, Republicans freaked out. Rightly so. We've watched both Bill and Hillary Clinton avoid justice that would never be afforded to any of us. Democrats high-fived each other. In hindsight, it's a relief that she wasn't prosecuted at that time. Of all the crimes Hillary Clinton should be prosecuted for, using a personal email server is at the bottom of the list. On October 28th, 2016, just over a week before the 2016 election, Comey sent a letter to Congress advising them that Hillary Clinton's emails appeared in an unrelated investigation, the Anthony Weiner laptop. The FBI would review the new emails. After this news broke, Donald Trump said at a rally, quote, "Hillary Clinton's corruption is on a scale we have never seen before. We must not let her take her criminal scheme into the Oval Office." On November 6th, 2 days before the election, Comey again announced that no charges would be filed against Clinton. Once again, Republicans were angry, Democrats were relieved. Comey's press statement in referring to Hillary's use of a personal email server seems like the beginning of the chaos of the first Trump term. Since the Trump chaos was a new thing in American politics and I had no background on James Comey, I assumed he was an incompetent fool. Looking back, that whole ordeal gave the Democrats an excuse for why Hillary lost the election. With the Democrat cheat in place and the irrational belief Democrats had that she was unstoppable, Comey's announcement to the press provided an excuse for her loss. It was necessary. She wasn't supposed to lose. James Comey had prior experience with the Clintons and their suspected corruption. In 1996, he served on the Special Committee to investigate Whitewater, an investigation into allegations that the Clintons took part in a fraudulent real estate deal. Comey was the prosecutor in the case against Mark Rich. and later took over the investigation into Clinton's pardon of Rich in 2002. Comey later wrote that he was stunned by the pardon. The FBI released the files surrounding the pardon just 1 week before the 2016 election. It's almost as if they were warning the witch to drop out. Since she was supposed to win, she didn't. We're supposed to hate Comey. We've been led to believe that he is the enemy. However, everything I've seen from prior to President Trump, James Comey was an honest, law-abiding, and respected member of the law enforcement community. Did he suddenly become a protector of the Bushes and Clintons? We know that neither Clinton has ever been prosecuted for their scandals, but we don't know why. I don't think it's because James Comey is a Clinton supporter. As much as Mueller and Comey tried to be apolitical, Comey was surrounded by compromised liberal FBI agents like Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, and Lisa Page. Unfortunately, justice takes time. And the Clintons had decades to master their corruption. Maybe the FBI needed decades to prosecute it. The 9/11 suspected terrorists. While researching the 3 papers I've written surrounding Guantanamo Bay, something was stuck in the back of my mind. Why has it taken so long to prosecute the suspected terrorists of the 9/11 and USS Cole bombings? The delays surrounding the trials are hard to understand. When Lloyd Austin rescinded the plea deal last year for the remaining suspects, alarm bells sounded. Someone does not want the plea deals to proceed as scheduled. A plea deal without answers to important questions surrounding the 9/11 and USS Cole attacks is apparently not the way this story is supposed to end. To increase the alarm bells, after it was determined that Austin didn't have the authority to rescind the plea deals and the military commission hearings could proceed, they were delayed by power outages. It was at that moment that a thought flooded my mind. Has this all been about disclosing who was behind the 9/11 attacks? What if the FBI discovered that the CIA and members of our government were behind all of the past terror attacks, including the USS Cole bombing and the 9/11 attacks? Has everything, the 2016-2020 elections, Russiagate, COVID, the Biden term, everything, been a distraction while a prosecution of those responsible for the terror attacks has been built? What if John Ashcroft, Robert Mueller, James Comey, and many others have been building a case against the CIA and the government for decades? Do the suspected 9/11 terrorists at Guantanamo Bay have evidence that our government was behind the attacks? Why has John Brennan been quieter than usual? Where is James Clapper? Why was John Ratcliffe confirmed as CIA director without any controversy or argument, unlike the confirmations of Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and others? Why don't we hear news about John Ratcliffe for the CIA? The shocked expressions on the faces of Jeb and Laura Bush at George H.W.'s funeral make me wonder if the envelopes contained information concerning the exposure of past presidents in the terror attacks. More Comey kayfabe. The kayfabe didn't end with James Comey. It's now spread to his daughter, Maureen. Maureen Comey is an attorney at the Southern District of New York, the same SDNY that employed her father and Rudy Giuliani. She's been attacked on social media, and we're supposed to believe that she, like her father, is trying to destroy President Trump and his goal of making America great again. It is real, and it's important we use discernment. Maureen Comey is one of the lead prosecutors in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. She also worked on the Jeffrey Epstein case. While everyone is distracting us with the delay in the release of the Epstein files, we should remember that Maureen Comey was not and has not been removed from the Epstein or Maxwell case, even after President Trump was elected and Pam Bondi became Attorney General. To the contrary, in December, Maureen filed a notice with the United States District Court that she had joined the prosecutor's team in the ongoing case against Sean Diddy Combs. Not only was she not fired, she was added to what can probably be considered as the music industry's version of the Epstein honeypot case. James Comey's daughter is one of the lead prosecutors in the Epstein, Maxwell, Diddy cases. We're supposed to hate her too. It's not working for me. It's long been suspected that the Clintons were connected to Epstein and Maxwell. Who were they working for? How would they be connected to the 9/11 attacks? This portrait, reportedly found at Epstein's home, may provide a clue. For those of you just listening, it's the famous Epstein portrait of George W. Bush with a paper airplane and the knocked down block towers. There is something else about James Comey that makes me skeptical of the push to hate him. As I've written in my other papers, I'm expecting exposure on a massive scale. The American people need to know what they've done to us so that we never allow it to happen again. There has to be a monumental historical record so that we will never forget. In a 2015 speech at the Holocaust Museum, James Comey gave a speech in which he said, "I believe that the Holocaust is the most significant event in human history." He went on to speak of the horrific display of inhumanity. Wouldn't the involvement of the United States government in the 9/11 attacks also be a horrific display of humanity? In college, James Comey majored in chemistry and religion and was born into an Irish Catholic family. When describing the Holocaust, he said, "How is that consistent with the concept of a loving God? How could there possibly be meaning in life when so many lives were snuffed out in such a fashion?" He goes on to say that he has asked those questions his entire life, including while he was standing in the pit at Ground Zero in early 2002. Comey said that he requires every new FBI agent to go to the Holocaust Museum. In explaining why he does so, he said, quote, "I want them to learn about abuse of authority on a breathtaking scale, but I want them to confront something more painful and more dangerous. I want them to see humanity and what we are capable of. I want them to see that although this slaughter was led by sick and evil people, those sick and evil leaders were joined by and followed by people who loved their families, took soup to a sick neighbor, went to church, and gave to charity. Good people helped murder millions. And that's the most frightening lesson of all, that our very humanity made us capable of, even susceptible to, surrendering our individual moral authority to the group where it can be hijacked by evil, of being so cowed by those in power, of convincing ourselves of nearly anything." End quote. James Comey felt it was important to require his agents to confront the atrocities of the Holocaust, just as the Allied governments required of the Germans after World War II, just as I believe Americans will be required to confront the atrocities of our own government. When this war is over, it is my sincere hope that the people who sacrificed their reputations, their lives, to save our country are recognized and rewarded for that sacrifice. History is written by the victors, those who were attacked and smeared as they saved our country must be celebrated for their patriotism in bringing down the treasonous bastards in our own government. That's Dawn Billie, DAWNBILLIE.substack.com. Go there. That's my favorite piece from her. And it's a close first because her other pieces on Guantanamo Bay. Guys, go to dawnbillie.substack.com, DAWNBILLIE.substack.com. Check it out today. Furthermore, my special on all products, just for you guys here. Promo code FREEDOM30 at tulipblooms.shop and epicminerals.net. Get shopping. It's not going to last forever. And this promo code, you only get one use. Make it count. Let's pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.